As I stood there, knife in hand, ready to cut my birthday cake, the ecstasy of the moment quickly faded. My husband Michael yelled out of the blue, "Stop this foolishness." Before I could reply, he slapped me hard across the face. I was unable to convey my surprise. Then, in a fit of rage, he flung me to the ground and grabbed my arms. All of my preconceived ideas about love crumbled and lay shattered and humiliated as soon as I touched the cold earth beneath me. I realized that I was more than just the target of his wrath now. I was a woman determined to break free from the hold of abuse. I'm Emily, and I'm 30 years old. I currently live in Chicago. I manage marketing for an Illinois software company that my father built from the ground up. This $100 million company is not just any old one. Since my father's unexpected passing, I have continued his heritage. As I sit here, I reflect on my life. I can't help but think back on how my 31st birthday turned everything around. Rather than being a happy, lighthearted, and affectionate occasion, it was a terrifying nightmare that devastated my world. I had been eagerly awaiting my birthday for several weeks. In an attempt to honor my father, I made sure everything was in its proper place. While celebrating the start of a new year, I pictured a group of the people I loved the most laughing and feeling warm together. Still, though, Michael had been distant for months. He had been spending more time at work and less time with me after 5 years of marriage, almost as if he was lost in his own thoughts. I would approach him often about it, but he would always dismiss me, stating that he was under a lot of stress. Though I had a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right, I decided to ignore it in the hopes that it would pass. The day I'm celebrating, trying to make sure that everything went according to plan, I was a bundle of nerves. Excitement in the house grew as friends and family began to arrive. My best buddy, Jessica, was the first person through the door. Emily. With her eyes glimmering from the decorations, she remarked, "Everything looks stunning. Regards, Jessica." I can only hope Michael will enjoy it. As I answered, I searched the area for him, notwithstanding my zeal. I could not shake the feeling that he was unhappy. Feel comfortable with him. Let's just have fun tonight. Jessica pulled me into the living area, where people were mixing and chatting. The longer the celebration lasted, the more time Michael spent with his mother, and it was something I could not ignore. Helen has always been critical of me, and tonight was no exception. "Emily, dear," she continued, approaching to give me her whole attention as always. "Don't you think the colors are a little too similar, even though the embellishments are gorgeous?" A more sophisticated strategy would have been better. I forced a smile, feeling the familiar sting of her words. "I value your opinions, Helen." They appeared to have created a joyful environment. I was let down as Helen turned to leave with a small smile on her face. Not that Michael truly looked at me when I saw him grinning with his sister Lisa. We were warm and loving to one another what feels like a long time ago. When it was finally time to cut the cake, I felt a surge of excitement. It was my moment, and I wanted to celebrate it with everyone I loved. I was at the head of the table, knife in hand, and ready for help from loved ones. But just before I took that first cut, Michael abruptly stood up. "Emily, stop talking like this," he yelled in a powerful voice. With my heart pounding, I froze the knife and hovered over the cake, staring at us with everyone else in the room frozen in silence. "What subject are you talking about?" I stumbled, confused. "The house and the company need to be retitled in my name." His expression was one of frustrated entitlement. "They are not required. You've never appreciated their true worth." His comments kept repeating in my mind, and I couldn't believe he was serious. "This company is worth between $150 million. It was exactly my father's background, and he roared back, "It's time you realized you have no idea how to run it. I'm handling things for us so that we can finally put the past behind us." My heart sank when I saw how reasonable his expectations were. He wasn't just trying to control me. He was attempting to take advantage of all my dad had worked so hard to create. I'm not trying to make anything very clear with what I stated. This is mine, and I won't let you take it from me. The tension in the room built up before I could reply. Michael struck me across the face with a firm slap. The sound echoed in the stunned silence. Embarrassed and fooled, I lurched back, my palm flying to my cheek. Enraged, he grabbed me and threw me to the ground. My heart raced with fear and disorientation when I felt the hard, cold floor beneath me. I could feel the expressions of shock and horror that followed our companions as they stared at me. Helen merely nodded as she stood behind her kid. I felt very let down. Give up on my life. Emily, I'm overloving you. I'm going to marry a business-savvy individual. When he said those things, they were far more scathing than the physical blow. Tears stream down my cheeks as I fly upstairs and feel the walls shut in on me. I was crying uncontrollably, gasping for air, and collapsing into my bed under the weight of his betrayal. A soft tap on the door was heard a few seconds later. "Emily, it's me." "Jeezy," she said as she rushed to my side and cautiously pulled open the door. "Please, God, are you okay? How on earth could he have done that?" "I have no idea what happened." "Jessica." I sobbed as everything seemed to be crushing me. "I thought we were pretty happy. He seemed to be in love with me." "Emily, I'm telling you. This isn't acceptable," she said, pulling back to look me in the eye. "You have to get out of his way. He's had you in his grasp for a very long time. This is not an isolated incident." As I considered what she had said, I saw that I had been ignoring the symptoms for far too long. I thought back to all the times I'd been too wounded by Michael's jokes because he didn't take the time to understand how I felt and how I always felt like I had to be careful around him. "I'm unable to simply leave," I muttered and shook my head. "Do you think your spouse feels the same way about you as I do?" Jessica asked politely. "You deserve so much more than this, my dear." Sitting in total darkness in my bedroom. Something fresh, a spark of anger passed over me. Since I had been a victim for far too long, perhaps it was time for me to reclaim my life. I stared at the reflection in the mirror. I looked at a woman who was tired of being treated like a doorman. "I'll figure out how to solve this." I said that as the resolve within me began to grow. I had to start considering my next course of action, even though I knew it would not be simple. I stopped crying and began gathering my thoughts. My mind began formulating a plan. I resisted letting Helen or Michael decide how I would live. I was ready to retaliate, to show the truth and regain authority. In the days after that awful birthday party, I had no idea this was the start of empowerment and self-discovery. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. I was angry, upset, and most importantly, determined. I kept thinking about what Michael had said. "I'm overloving you. I'm going to marry a business-savvy individual." Those comments gave me fire, even if they felt like a stab to my heart. I realized that I had been living a lie and was deceived by love, and that I needed to face the harsh reality. "How are things going in your life, Emily?" Jessica asked when she stopped by a few days later. We were sitting in my living room, still covered in party favors. I tried cleaning up, but the decorations were a painful reminder of what had happened. "I don't know her, Jess." I admitted to feeling the weight of my situation. "I'm experiencing a mental revisiting of everything. I think our marriage worked well together. Sometimes, even when the signs are there, we decide to ignore them." "You should figure out what you really want," she said softly. "My goal is to take back my life." My voice was steady as I talked. "I want to show him who he really is." That's the way Jessica encouraged thinking. "But first, we need to gather some evidence." Approaching him without a plan is not a beneficial idea. Over the next 3 days, I started paying closer attention to everything Michael did. I observed his strange behavior, his late-night phone conversations, and his habit of setting his phone face down on the table. All this time, I had been disregarding these subtle signs, believing that things would turn out okay. One evening, I decided to stay up late and wait for him to come home from work. It was a sound I was accustomed to, his key spinning in the lock, and it made my heart skip a beat. It was difficult to read his face when he entered the living room and said, "Hey, Emily, you're still awake." Yes, I had problems falling asleep. I answered with a strained smile. What type of day did you experience? With a sideways glance in my direction, he said, "It's okay," and removed his shoes. I could feel the tension in the room even though I was watching him closely to attempt to gauge his mood. Michael, would you like to talk about what happened at the party? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Do we have to? I thought we were past that. When I pressed him, he gave me a contemptuous response and turned to go into the kitchen. You slapped me in front of our friends. We can't just put things behind us. He looked at me and his eyes flared, agitated. You know how my mother gets angry. It was crucial that you give her some thought. I felt inadequate because of you. With a rush of defiance sweeping over me, I fired back. That you would still stand by her after that is unfathomable. Maybe you should look into that yourself. He lost his rage first and marched into the kitchen. My heart fell. This conversation was stagnating and I was growing impatient. Weeks turned into days as time passed. I continued my investigation because I was determined to learn the truth. With assistance from Jessica, it turned out that Michael and his assistant Maya had spent a lot more time together than I had assumed. The more I understood, the more apparent it seemed that they would meet together for dinner or coffee. One evening, while browsing social media, I came upon a picture of Michael and Maya sharing a laugh at a restaurant. In the caption, it stated, "I'm fortunate to be spending a date night with my best friend." My heart was cold. That they were having an affair had escaped my notice. With a quick gasp, Jess's eyes widen as I hand out the photo and say, "Look at this." "This confirms what we suspected," she exclaimed, her eyes flaming with rage. "He's definitely cheating on you." "You have to turn to face him," I replied in a stern tone. "I will. I have to have more evidence beforehand, though. I'm not going to let him change the story." I decided with renewed vigor to get an appointment with a lawyer. I needed to find my reasons and prepare for the battle that was ahead. After searching for local lawyers, I found one with a strong history of handling cases just like mine. Throughout the consultation, I told the attorney Rachel everything. My spouse appears to be cheating on me and is attempting to take advantage of my financial situation. I opened out to her and told her how much my heart was racing. Rachel nodded, listening intently and making notes. "Getting evidence will be necessary for any legal action," she said. "Make sure to document anything you can, such as conversations, dates, and any discrepancies in your money. With this approach, you'll be prepared to defend yourself." Possessing a feeling of power. Once I was home, I set about organizing what I had learned. I collected suspicious conversation notes, emails, and text messages. My strength began to increase as the puzzle parts began to fit together. One evening, I was reviewing my notes at the kitchen table. Michael came in. "Just going over some things," he said in a cynical tone, appearing surprised to find me up this late working. I gave a tone-neutral response. "Which goods?" His eyes sharpened as he asked, "Just some personal projects," and I stepped forward to respond. "You have been acting suspiciously lately. Do you want to tell me something about yourself?" The sharp edge of his voice carried a touch of distrust. "No, not at all," I replied, forcing a smile, happy to be left alone. "After the festivities." Michael didn't say anything more, but he didn't stop staring at me like he could read my mind. I remained calm, but I could feel my anxiety tense. Our stress had reached a breaking point, so it was only a matter of time until everything came crashing down. I worked diligently over the next few days to gather more evidence of Michael's betrayal and dishonesty. I looked into our business's accounts with Rachel's assistance. I made an astonishing discovery. Michael had been moving money out of my business and into another account for months. I was sick to my stomach when I realized this, but it made me more determined. Adultery was no longer the only issue here. I was not going to let him get away with mistreating people financially. It all started when I received a call from Rachel Emily. She told me we had enough evidence to proceed with Michael's divorce and come clean about his theft. "Are you ready to take this on?" "Yes," I replied. I talked in a firm, steady voice. "I'm ready." Keeping a plan in mind, I decided to have a conversation with Michael in a secure setting. I invited him to come over to the house and told him we needed to talk things out. It would be the perfect chance to impart everything I had discovered and put an end to his misleading plan. When Michael came, he was surprised to discover me seated at the dining table with a stack of documents in front of me. His expression shifted from confusion to suspicion as he drew nearer. "What is this whole thing? You can no longer avoid this," he continued, his brow furrowed. "I wanted to show you something significant." My pulse was pounding when I said, "I have proof of your financial crimes and deceit." "Michael." His expression became pale. "What subject are you talking about?" he mumbled, his eyes darting to the papers in front of me. "I have proof of your adulterous affair with Maya, and I found the money you've been siphoning off to fund your own account at my company." I saw the color drain from his face. "Did you honestly think I wouldn't know?" He opened his mouth to protest, but I spoke up before he could. "You think you're in charge of me. You're way over your head, and I won't let you take over my life any longer." Michael lost his rage the moment he knew he'd been found out. "You don't know what you're talking about. Emily, all of this is in your mind. It's just you being paranoid." Even though he was speaking louder, it was clear that he was distrusting and desperate. I repeated, incredulous. "I vouch for it. Michael, you've been robbing me of things and betraying what we once shared." He lunged at me, and I stood my ground for the first time in a long time. That you wouldn't terrify me as much didn't bother me. I spoke in a cool, collected voice. Just then there was a knock on the door. Rachel and a couple of the police officers were present. As soon as they got inside, one of the policemen shouted, "Michael Thompson, you are under arrest for embezzlement and domestic abuse." Michael's face became white, and he realized that I had set up a trap for him. He cried, "It's not possible." But it was too late now. A surge of relief swept over me as I saw the officers move swiftly to place handcuffs on him. For the first time, I was no longer the victim. I was reclaiming my own life as they took him out. Startled, I glanced around. It was a task I had successfully completed. I knew my strength, stood up for what was right, and told the truth. The long-lasting shadow of darkness over my life was starting to lift. Over the next few weeks, I focused on making a fresh start. To honor my father and grow the business, I gave everything. With help from Rachel, I ensured that Michael was held responsible for all of his legal actions and that I remained in control of the company. I was running late to work one evening. I paused to process everything that had happened. I realized that I had finished a circle. I had overcome my challenges and emerged victorious. It had been a difficult and protracted process, but I had reclaimed my voice and authority. As I looked out the window at the sun setting, I felt calm. I was ready to write my own story and move on from the past. Since my journey of self-discovery had just barely begun, I was excited to see where it would lead.